Hello everyone, today we're going to download a free piece of CAD software, consider our prototype and start drawing the first pieces for it. Hi, I'm James, welcome back. So today's video, I'm afraid, is a long one, but by the end of it we will have downloaded some free software and we will have made a start on the process of using it and start to draw our first part. Now, one of the challenges with producing a video of this nature, particularly one where we look at a piece of software, is we run into the issue of whether that piece of software is going to work on a Mac as well as a PC. Now, I'm not sure how well the software I'm going to present to you works on a Mac. I've not tried it. So today's video really is focused for the PC user. Now, I do use a Mac as well as a PC myself, and in a future episode we will look at downloading a piece of software specifically for the Mac. But the reason I've chosen the piece of software that we're going to look at today is that the tools are quite basic. And you should really be able to apply them to any piece of CAD software you try. So if you come across something for a Mac that suits you better, you should still be able to follow along with the processes that we're going to look at in this video. So being mindful of the fact that this is a long video, you should see in the description to the video a list of chapter links, and you should be able to click on those links and it will jump you to relevant chapters. So this should make it easier to navigate through the video if you want to watch it, a little bit at a time, or skip back and review a section. If there are no chapters in the video description, then I'm afraid I couldn't get it to work. It was too much for me, and I'll keep plugging away at it and hopefully have that up and running ready for our next video. But fingers crossed it'll work, and it will hopefully make the video easier to follow. And finally, before we get started, many thanks to all of the new subscribers who've come on board recently. We've just topped, I think it's 400 now, or thereabouts, and I'm quite overwhelmed that so many people would be willing to or keen to follow along on this journey. So thank you to those of you who have subscribed. I'm afraid it's maybe rather ambitious. So I've got a rather special announcement planned for my 500th subscriber. So we are 80% of the way there now, just another 100 viewers to go, and we should have a big announcement. Anyway, thank you to all of you. Your support really is appreciated. Okay, so to download a copy of LibreCAD, I've gone into Google, LibreCAD, L-I-B-R-E-C-A-D, and we just do a quick search. And this should pop up first of all, LibreCAD, free open source 2D CAD. Before we click on that link, let's have a look at some of the questions people ask, because this gives us some useful insight to the software. So the first question is LibreCAD compatible with AutoCAD? Now then, AutoCAD I think was probably one of the first computer-aided design packages, and it's considered by many to sort of be an industry standard. And by that I mean that the AutoCAD file types are interchangeable between different packages. So really, if we're going to use a CAD package, it's handy if it has this compatibility, and we'll talk more about that later in the episode, but let's just have a look at the answers. So LibreCAD was developed as a fork of QCAD Community Edition. LibreCAD uses the AutoCAD DXF file format internally for import and save files, as well as allowing export to many other file formats. Now, if none of that means anything to you, don't worry, we're going to cover that a little bit later on. But basically that's good. It will produce a DXF file, and we'll talk later this episode about why that's important. Is LibreCAD any good? Well, I think it is. Let's see what it says here. LibreCAD is a great option for drafters who need the best CAD tools but cannot afford private enterprise software. It's the best option if you want to get started right away creating 2D technical drawings. It also has most of the functions you'll need, as well as an easy interface to work with. Now, I would certainly agree with all of that. Okay, the next question, and this is perhaps an important one, is LibreCAD safe to download? Well, I found it to be safe. I didn't get any viruses or anything like that. It says here you can download, install and distribute LibreCAD freely with no fear of copyright infringement. So that's a really important thing to think about. I mean, these questions go on and on. You can go through these to your heart's content. Let's just have a look at this one. Is LibreCAD a 3D? What it means is 3D drawing package. And here we go. What does it say? LibreCAD is licensed under the GPL. You can find its complete source code on GitHub. Blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really give us the answer. Basically, no, it's a 2D package. And I'll talk a little bit later on about why I think 2D CAD is where we ought to be starting from. Anyway, cut a long story short and get on with the process. I think LibreCAD is pretty good. So let's close all this back up, click on the link, and this will take us to the page where we can download the software. And on a PC, I just clicked on the link here and it downloaded just like any other file. So I won't go through the installation process because I've already installed it. I don't want to corrupt the installation I've already got. I'm sure most of you are familiar with installing software, but basically if you click this link here, it will take you through the process and it will tell you what you need to do. So we'll leave that there for now, and when we come back to this, I'll have LibreCAD up on the screen and we'll just have a quick look at it. Okay, so assuming your download of LibreCAD was successful, when you first open the software up, this is the screen you'll be presented with. Now, one of the things I really like about this piece of software is it is very similar to the other piece of software that you'll see me use, 2D Design. In fact, it does pretty much everything that 2D Design does, just as well. There's one or two things about LibreCAD that are a little bit irksome, but they're not really a problem. They're not bad. Anyway, this is the screen. So what I thought I'd do is just spend a couple of minutes, probably a bit longer than that, but maybe 5 minutes, running through the basic layout of the screen, and we'll just talk about the geography of what's what on this screen. We'll draw a couple of little lines, then I'm going to come out of LibreCAD, show you some other stuff, and then we'll come back to this a little bit later on, and we can hopefully make some sense of what the tools are. But when we first turn it on, one of the things that it's worth doing is on the top menu option, if we click for options and we look at application preferences, this window will appear and it gives us all sorts of controls and things to think about, some of which are important, some of which really are nice to mess around with. Maybe the first thing you might like to do is click on this tab, Defaults, and you can choose the units for your drawing. Now, I tend to draw in millimeters, although I'm quite happy working with any unit, and you can see on here it will deal with pretty much any unit you'd like. For example, if you're interested in the light year, that's on there as well, but for now I'm just going to keep that on millimeter. You can experiment with these things to your heart's content. Now, one thing I will mention, you'll see the background here is black. Now, I prefer to draw on a white background, and this is really very subjective. Certainly when I first started using CAD many years ago, I used AutoCAD and drew with the black background, and when I first started drawing with the white background, it hurt my eyes and I couldn't see the sense in it. Now I prefer to work with white. So over here we've got our graphic colours, and we could change all these things. Now, if this is your first time on the software, some of these things might not make any sense to you, but just to show you, we can go on background, click this little coloured tab here, and we could change it to any colour we like. I like to have a nice bright screen, so I'll click the white box here. Of course, we could go for custom colours and what have you, but I'm going to go with that one. Click OK, and now my background has switched to white and the dots have become black. Okay, by default, these big squares are 100mm by 100mm. This red cross is my datum, and the smaller dots are on a 10mm grid. Now, all of that is customizable. We can change the grid size to whatever we like, and we will cover all of that shortly, but anyway, that's that. If we come up the top here, this is our grid icon on the top menu, and we can toggle the grid on and off. Really, unless you're drawing to the grid isn't really necessary, although it can serve as a visual reference to sort of keep things in line and what have you. So that's quite good. These tools here allow you to zoom in on your drawing and zoom out and automatically sort of zoom so that your drawing is fitted on the page. They're quite useful, but there's no point experimenting with those yet because we've not drawn anything. And we've got some simple controls over here for drawing lines and what have you. So I can left click to start a line, left click to finish a line. This is exactly the same as I was showing you in the last episode. We can draw a horizontal line. So for example, in this case, I've chosen the horizontal tool, and up here we can type a length in. So let's make my line 100 millimeters long, and there we go, we've got our 100 millimeter long line, and it's attached it onto that point there because that's where I dropped it. What else can we draw? We've got vertical lines, all sorts of things. We've got our trimming tools here, fillets and chamfers or bevels, depending on what terminology you'd prefer to use. So I'm just going to leave this on this screen just for the moment, and we will come back to this. And I'm going to do that for two reasons. One is I want to show you some other stuff before we come back into LibreCAD. And secondly, I've set a screen capture box up to record this, but I've missized it so that you can't see some really important information going on the bottom of the screen. So I'll close this down, we'll do some other stuff, and we'll come back to this shortly. Okay, so before we get too excited about today's CAD drawing, what I wanted to do was just show you again this my 3D model of Bodiam Station. And there is a reason why I'd like to show it to you. Because one could argue, why mess around drawing things with 2D CAD when we could just do it straight away in 3D CAD? And that's a good point. And I'd like to, over the course of this video, explain why I think 2D CAD is perhaps better for model makers, and certainly as a start, as an entry point into 3D CAD. So here's my drawing of Bodiam Station. If I take a cross section through it, and here we go, and we have a little look down inside and have a look at how it's been constructed. Let's zoom in on this corner. I've designed this thing to be laser cut from 1mm thick MDF, and so you can see that this front wall of the station here is two panels. There's this wall here, which is labelled the, there we go, the front outer wall skin, and if I hover over this one, the front inner wall skin. And they're slightly different in all sorts of different ways. For example, when they're glued together, they allow for this rebate, which allows the end wall to glue in. There's also some details of the windows that we'll show. We can see how the window frames are a separate piece that's cut out and stuck on. If we have a look, for example, at this dividing wall, if I hover over it, you can see that if you follow this orange line round, you can see it's actually notched into a little housing that's allowed for in the inner wall skin, and you'll see on the model how those walls are removable so that we can put a camera inside. Anyway, the takeaway from showing you this really is that each of these pieces that I'm showing you are essentially two-dimensional. Certainly all the dimensions are 2D, and the thickness is accounted for, this 1mm thickness, by the thickness of the material itself. So in terms of the drawing that we would need to produce this, it is just a two-dimensional drawing which could be sent to the laser cutter. And we'll look at this drawing in a bit more detail in just a moment. This whole building has been built up from two-dimensional panels. So for example, if I go to my files, all of these files are different pieces and parts of Bodiam Station. So if we look at the front wall outer skin, for example, if I open this file and I'll just run through a little process here. Now I will go through this in detail when the time is right, but for now we're just going to whiz through this quickly and it'll think about it for a moment, and then it will bring up on the screen the two-dimensional profile of here we go, the two-dimensional profile of that outer wall skin, plus an extra line that shouldn't be there. Let me just delete that one. There we go. So that is our wall profile that I had drawn previously in 2D CAD software. Now I must explain here that I'm using, should be obvious, but I'm using 3D software. I'm actually using SolidWorks. Now, having got that 2D profile, I can extrude that using the extrude tool. And if I enter in this box on the left, 1 millimeter, there we go, that has now given that 1 millimeter thickness. Now I could edit that if I wanted to. Let's imagine I wanted it not 1 millimeter, let's make it 5 millimeters, which will look a bit daft, but hopefully make the point. So we can produce a 3D drawing from our 2D profiles, and you could do that in pretty much any 3D software very easily. So that's why I'd like us to focus on the 2D drawing first of all, because I think you'll find the transition from 2D to 3D much simpler once you understand all the geometrical principles with working with 2D. So what I'm going to do is close SolidWorks down. We'll go back into my 2D CAD software. We'll open up this file. In fact, we'll open up this file and the inner wall skin and the window frame. We'll have a look at those drawings. We'll then have a look at the physical parts sort of straight out of the laser cutter, and then we'll have a look at recreating those in LibreCAD. So hang on and I'll show you how to do it. So before we get into the CAD work, I'd like to show you this again. Now you've seen this previously. This is the Lasercut parts for the station, with the exception of a couple of other pieces here, which are the wall elements for the front and back walls. And let's just spend a moment having a look at these, and I'll explain a little bit which I think will be of benefit to us as we look at the CAD process. So along the bottom of here I've got all of the window frames, and I'll just quickly cut those out. They're connected with little tabs, so I'll just cut through the material that's holding it in. I should have been more organised and done this previously. There we go. Let's just fish that out. So we've got our window frame. Okay, let's put these pieces out of the way. Now the way this has been constructed, we've got two pieces. These are the bits I showed you on the 3D model. This is the inside surface of the building, the inside wall, and we've got some detail engraved on there. This piece is the external wall panel, and it's ever so slightly longer, and that's to create that rebate that the end wall will fit into. Okay, now if we have a look at this, the windows look rather peculiar. Now I have in one of my earlier videos mentioned these windows before, but we'll just cover them again, so just in case anybody hasn't seen that video, and it hopefully will make a little bit more sense. I was very keen with this model to try and replicate the vertical sliding sash windows. So here we have the top sash on the outer wall, and the inner wall has the lower sash, and when put together, if I hold that at an angle, hopefully you can see that the two are together, but it doesn't look quite right until we stick a window frame on. Now This will obviously look a lot better when it's painted, but you sort of get the idea. Okay, hopefully the camera's picking that up. So that works on what will be the outer face, and also on the inner face where it had a similar framework. And this is not an exact copy of Bodiam, but it's more or less, you know, it's good enough for our purposes here. So we see that sort of effect on the inside too. Now I mentioned that just so that when we look at the CAD work for the walls, this rather peculiar window arrangement hopefully might make a little bit of sense. And just whilst we're here, I mentioned that those internal walls were removable so we could get a camera in the building, and these are the slots that those wall sections will slot into. They're sort of, hang on, this is difficult to do, there we go, they sort of slide in and out there. Okay, let's get on with some CAD. Right, so I'm aware that in producing this video is now getting rather long, so I'm going to whip through this next bit very quickly. Here we have on screen the three pieces that I've just shown you. We've got the window frame, the inner wall skin, and the outer wall. Now on Bodiam Station this is clad in corrugated iron, but for now let's just deal with this as it is. What I'm going to do is just use my dimensioning tool and put some quick measurements onto here, and then we're going to have a go at recreating this in LibreCAD. So we've got a measurement of 41.93 millimeters high and 118.3 millimeters wide in the horizontal axis. Now these measurements may seem peculiar, and that's because I've scaled these down from the full size measurements. But it doesn't matter because we can work to any degree of precision we like in CAD. So that's basically what we're going to be trying to recreate. So what I'm going to do is copy that. I'm going to create a new drawing, paste that drawing in, and what I'm going to do is export this now. So that's kind of save this file. Now this software package I'm using here, 2D Design, will save with its own kind of proprietary file type. So rather than save, I'm going to export the file, and I'm going to call it Bodiam Wall Outer Skin. Okay, and I'm going to save that as a DXF file. Now you may remember when we were talking about downloading the file, downloading LibreCAD, I mentioned file types and the compatibility with AutoCAD. Well, the DXF file, I believe it stands for Drawing Exchange Format or File, one of the two. This is kind of an AutoCAD standard, and this will work in all CAD software, or in fact it will work in most, not all, and that's why I think an ability to import and save files in a DXF format is really important. So for example, if you produced a drawing of your own project and you'd like to send that away and have it laser cut, very often the laser cutters will prefer a DXF file. So if we can create one, that's great. Anyway, I've given it a name, we've chosen the file type, so I'll hit save. Right, so we're in LibreCAD, and what we're going to have a go at doing is reproducing that drawing that I've already produced. But what I'm going to do is bring in the drawing that I've drawn previously, import it into this piece of software so we've got an example to copy. Now if you're using this for the first time, you won't need to open a file. However, all these files that I'm showing I will be sharing online, so I may as well show you how to open them now whilst we're here. So it's very simple. We'll just go File, Open, and it's found my drawing. Obviously you could browse through your documents to wherever you may have a saved file, but in this case it's Bodiam Wall Outer Skin, and we'll hit Open, and there we go, there's our drawing. Exactly the same as it was before. Now because this video is really quite long already, I won't go through drawing all of these windows today because these are quite complex, but let's for now just concentrate on drawing the rectangle, the basic shape. So we've got our measurements, let's make a start. So before we start drawing this, let's just have a look at a couple of these controls which I mentioned earlier but which I couldn't show you because we didn't have any lines. Here's our drawing, and we can zoom in with this tool here, and we can zoom out with this tool here, And this one next to it, this is really good. This is an auto zoom. We can just click on there and our drawing will fill our page. That's really useful. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and leave our drawing there. And you can see this red cross, this is our datum. Now if you remember back to part 1 in this series where I laboured on about vectors, if I hover just over this datum, we can see in the bottom left hand corner of the screen all those numbers that we had in the other piece of software. So if I hover over it, the top 2 values, 0, 0, that is the coordinates in the X and Y axis, so that is our absolute datum, and we can move away from there. The number in the immediate bottom left is a distance in millimetres from our datum, and that angle, which is currently 50.1944, is an angle from the horizontal. So if I move my mouse down, we'll see that angle decrease until we get to the x-axis itself, and it will go to 0. Anyway, let's have a look at how we might recreate this drawing using the tools here. Now I won't go through how to draw the windows, we'll keep it very simple. So let's begin with the vertical line tool. So if I select that, and up the top here in this length box we can put a value in. So let's put 41.93 millimeters, and we could drop it anywhere we like on the screen, doesn't matter. I'll tell you what, let's put it on the absolute datum. Doesn't need to be there, but let's put it there just for the fun of it. So there's our line. We could now have a go at a horizontal line. So let's choose the horizontal line. The length is already put in for us, not by default, it's just because I'd had a play at this before I videoed this, so that's why that measurement is there, but we could change that to whatever we wanted it to be. And let's stick a horizontal line in here. Now I'll just mention something here. This tool here with all the green dots that's currently highlighted, that is the grid lock tool. So my cursor is kind of magnetically sticking to the 10mm grid on the screen. If I turn that off, I can now float anywhere I like. But if you recall from I think it was in the last episode, if we just draw lines randomly, it's not helpful. So for now I'm going to keep that grid on, and that grid lock I should call it, and drop that line just there. I'm going to turn that grid lock off now, and if we have a look, we've got our vertical line, our end of our wall, and our baseline in. And we could repeat that process. I could put another horizontal line in and just attach it to the end. In fact, let's do that very quickly. Let's go to horizontal line tool again. If I were to choose this tool here, this will snap on an end point. So I can select that tool, and it will now want to snap to either end of those lines. I could put it over here if I wanted, but this is where we want it to go. So as long as I hover roughly in the vicinity of that end, I can click and it's drawn that line in. And so I could repeat that process with the vertical line, and it's set to my last setting of 41.93, and I can snap that on the end of there. So very quickly, that's our shape drawn. However, I'm going to delete those two lines, so I've just click on the line to select it, and it becomes highlighted with a sort of dashed line, and hit the delete button on my keyboard and get rid of those. Let's show you another tool very quickly. If I get my select tool and select this line, what I'm going to do is use this tool over here called offset, and that will draw a parallel line, or a line parallel to this one we've just selected. So I select that tool, and up here we have a distance box. Now it's just by default it's putting a suggested distance in of 35mm. Let's change that to 41.93, and if we have a look down here, this is quite useful. It says specify direction of offset. Now if I just zoom out a little bit. What that means is if I hover my mouse either just above that line or below it, hang on, it's not letting me draw below the datum, but anyway, click just above that line and it's popped that line in for me, and it's highlighted with that dashed line. So if I hit my select tool, there we go. Now let's offset this line here, and we want that to be a distance of 118.3. Back down here it says specify direction of offset, so by hovering my mouse to either the left hand side of that vertical line or the right, we can choose where that offset direction is going to be. So clearly I want it over here, so I could just hover randomly here, left click, and it drops that line in for me, and you can see it there highlighted in a dashed line. So that's how quickly we can draw that rectangle, and I've shown you two methods, and there are other methods for doing it. So just very quickly, I'm going to run through this once more, just for the purposes really of just repeating and just showing you what's what. So I've used I'm not going to talk you through the whole thing. I'm just repeating that process just to show you how quick it can be. Put the 41.93. I can hover above or below. I want it there. And now I'm going to offset this line, distance of 118.3. And again, I can hover where I want it to go. That's where I want it to go. And we've repeated it again. So with those basic tools, we can draw an outline. Now, I'll get into the doors and the windows next time, but let's just zoom in a little bit, and I'll just show you one or two other ways in which we can use those tools that we've just looked at. So for example, let's put a door in here. Now I'm just going to make the measurements up for the door, but we know that the sides of the door are vertical, so we can use this as a kind of a reference, and we can offset this. So I'm going to make it, I'm just making this up, 30 millimeters. Here that line is now selected, so we can offset that. I'm just going to make this up, 20, let's do it 20, something like that. We can pop that there. We could select this line here, offset upwards, let's say 35. I mean, I don't know if that's correct, but that will do. And that's given us the basic geometry for that door. Now the reason I've done that quickly is I want to show you another tool that's really useful. What we want to do now, this rectangle represents where our door needs to go, but we've got some additional lines we need to trim away. So we can do that with this tool here, the trim tool. So if we select that tool and we just have a little look down here, this box is really useful because it tells you what you need to do as you're working. So it says select limiting entity. So what that means is kind of where do we want to trim. Now our limiting entity is this horizontal line. So if I select that, and it gets highlighted green, I hope you can see that on your screen. It then says select entity to trim. So we want to trim this line beyond our limiting entity, which is this horizontal line. So if I just click here, it will trim it away. It's as simple as that. And if I press escape twice, that takes me out of the tool. So let's do that again. Trim, select limiting entity. Again, we'll have this horizontal line. And it says down here, select entity to trim. So in this case, I'll choose the right hand side of that door. And that's all there is to it. So once we've mastered that tool, we can now trim away some of our other bits and pieces. And oh, I've done that wrong. Click the wrong side of the line. Let's do that again. So our limiting entity then is this right hand side of the door. Select there. I want to trim away this part of this line. This is the bit I don't want, so I click on the piece I want to save. And that is all there is to it. So I've gone through that quickly. We will be covering this in a bit more depth in the next episode, but what I wanted to show you, basically we've got two ways of drawing lines. We can draw a line using our tools here, we can offset the lines, and I've shown you how to use a basic delete tool. That should be enough to sort of get you going. I hope you found that useful. So that's all we've got time for today, folks. Next time I promise we will be having a look at the model of Bodiam Station. But until then, I hope you found the video useful, and please do leave your comments down below and I'll get back to you. I'll be really interested to read your thoughts. So till next time, thanks for watching. Bye bye everyone.